Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Kay Iserwood-Darzik, and I am an architect and a retired U.S. Air Force officer. I have a 5-year Bachelor of Architecture degree from Kent State University, and I earned a Master's in Systems Management from University of Southern California while I was stationed in Germany. I've worked in many different aspects of design, the first of which was at Kent State University while I was going to school there in 1978. After I graduated, I went into the Air Force directly, commissioned into the Air Force, and I worked as an architect for a little over 20 years. When I retired, I was an independent consultant, and I worked for many firms that I was familiar with and had known during my active duty. And then in about 2005, one of the firms who I enjoyed working with very much, Sherlock, Smith & Adams, they're located in Montgomery, they asked me to come to them solely and just work with them on a part-time basis. However I wanted to work, they were very good to me. So I've been working with them since 2005 and still work with them today. I've lived all over the world because of being in the Air Force, but we came back home to Erie in 2003, a couple of years after I retired. Besides my work, I'm a wife and mom, and I've been married 42 years with 5 children, 3 of which went to McDowell, so I can relate to many of you as students at McDowell. Please write down my email. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. If you have any, just feel free to contact me. Let me know what your questions are, and if I don't know the answer, I'll find out. And thanks very much. So some of your questions might be, what do I do if I am interested in becoming an architect, if that's in my future, in terms of your education and the experiences that you might gain now? And I would just say in high school, certainly concentrate on math, any computer skills, art, design, graphics, very important to being able to become an architect. Those are key skills. But don't underestimate general courses. The English, the writing, the speeches, the being comfortable speaking to the public, all of those are very, very important to being an architect, because you will have to present. I've presented many times to different CEOs, general officers in my career to sell the design that I have created, and it's important that you know those general courses to be in a position to do that effectively. In college, you will need a degree from an accredited school. The National Architectural Accrediting Board is what you want to look for to make sure the school you're looking at, considering, has that accreditation. You will need a professional degree. It can be a Bachelor of Architecture, which is typically 5 years, a Master's of Architecture, which is typically 6, or a doctorate. That is the baseline for an architect to have a professional degree. Experience in licensing, once you do have your degree, it requires you to have registered experience. You have to document your experience, and it depends on what your professional degree is, but normally the total is about 8 to 10 years. So 5 years Bachelor of Architecture, 3 years of experience to be licensed. Just depends. There are some fast tracks at some particular schools to do it a little bit quicker. It's very important, your experience and to be licensed, because truly the health, safety, and welfare of the public is at your hands. You wouldn't want to live or walk into or work at a facility that is not designed knowing the structural and knowing all of the implications of that facility that will be used by the public. So it's very important that you get that correct experience and that you are licensed. You can specialize in architecture, just like if you were to earn a medical degree, go to residency, get your license to become a physician, you can specialize. Specializing in architecture would be somebody that really concentrates on retail, or concentrates on residential, or concentrates on a certain aspect of the design. I concentrate on medical facilities. That's my specialty. That's what I did for half of my career in the Air Force, and that's what I still do today. So a little bit more on registration and licensing. Your experience requirements will vary by jurisdiction, what state you're trying to get licensed in, but as I said, it's typically you need about 3 years of experience. That experience must be documented. And over to the right there, you see the chart that you need 3,740 hours, and they're broken down into different areas. Much of that time needs to be under the direct supervision of a licensed architect. You can go to the websites that I have at the bottom of the screen and learn more about the process. But basically, a lot of your time has to be under a licensed architect. You need to document your time to prove that you actually have that experience even before you sit for your licensing exam. Once you do have the required hours, then you sit for the ARE, or the Architectural Registration Exam. The current version of that exam is 5.0. There are 6 divisions, and those are those same divisions you see at the chart on the right. They vary. Your test in each of the divisions varies from about 3 hours to 5 hours each. You can take them in any order. You can take them sequentially. You can take them return to one if you didn't pass one and take it again. They are challenging. The overall pass rate for the ARE is about 67%. Depending on which of the 6 parts you're looking at, that percentage pass rate varies from 45 to 70%. So don't be surprised if you need to take a portion of the test again, or maybe 3 times. The cost overall to take the exam is about $1,500. Each part can be taken again, and if you fail a part, you will have to pay for that part again. There are annual fees for your registration once you do pass the exam to maintain your registration and your license in your state and nationally if you choose to do that. But again, there's a lot of information about the exam in those 2 references, those 2 links that I have at the bottom of the screen. So feel free to check that out. Just a little bit of history. The ARE version 5.0 today is much different than when I took it. And I took it in 1987. When I took it, it was not computerized. It was paper and pencil, and it was over the course of 4 days. The design portion of the exam was a full 12-hour session. I was fortunate because I took it while I was stationed in Germany. So I was in a very small classroom being proctored by a registered architect with just a few of us taking it. But most of the architects in the United States who took the exam in the 80s would have to go to a very large convention center. Because it was paper and pencil, it was real time. You would go to a convention center, you would be assigned a drafting table with hundreds, if not thousands, of other people trying to take the exam with you. Some of the things that were recommended was lots of snacks. Bring a flag, a colorful, distinctive flag for your drafting table to attach to it, so that if you had to leave during the session to go to the restroom or to take a break, you could find your drafting table in the sea of all of those taking the exam based on the flag that you attached to your table. So it was a quite different process than it is today, which is all computerized and in smaller vignettes. So there's nothing that takes 12 hours. It's all 3 to 5 hours per session for those exams. This slide just shows the 6 divisions in the exam. The practice management, this is really about the firm, the business aspects of it, the finances, how to hire and fire, the contracts, all of the day-to-day business management for an architectural firm if you were to be in a position of owning one. And that's very important. So many architects are very, very good designers, but they don't know the first thing about business. So that's a very important skill to know if you're going to be successful, especially owning your firm one day. Project management, that part of the exam is all about team resources, work plan, execution, quality control of the overall project when you're in the position to manage it. The program and analysis, those will be questions about your site, your programming, all of the analytical pieces that go into it prior to actually designing the building. What is the site? What are the winds? Where is the sun coming from? What are the codes and regulations for this particular building in this particular state? California and earthquakes. Different states have different codes and regulations. So all of that analytical analysis. And then project planning and design, that's what you think of when you think of architects. It's laying it out, the systems, the integration, actually laying out the spaces and the design. And then project development, the 5th one, is a lot of detailing. You're getting into a lot of standards, you're getting into very, very specifics, all the while making sure that it's meeting the overall program budget, the project budget. And then the construction and evaluation, at some point when all of this is done, it will be built. So the architect plays a role in that in terms of going out onto the site, observing, making sure that everything that is being put in the ground and erected on the site conforms to the documents, and then a final closeout of the project documents and the completion. This particular slide just kind of shows a typical project timeline from my experience. And in my experience with what I did in the Air Force and what I'm doing now, we're selected for a project now in the firm that I'm working with, Sherlock, Smith & Adams, through a request for proposal, an RFP. You can also be selected through an IDIQ, which is an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. There's lots of different ways that you can be selected as an architectural firm to get the contract to do the design. Once you do have the contract and you are hired to do the design, then you'll develop the team. And as project manager, which I serve as a project manager, I determined what we're going to do in-house. What disciplines are we going to cover in-house? What disciplines are we going to have to go outside of our firm and hire a consultant to do? Do we have opportunities for joint ventures? Oftentimes we'll work with another design firm and they'll provide the electrical, the cost, we'll provide the architectural, the medical planning. We work with them to develop the team of resources that is going to work on the project. Once that's developed, we meet with the client. We iron out the scope of work and the budget, very important. Sometimes they'll give us the program for design. They'll give us what their concept of operations are, very detailed. They'll say, we need X number of rooms. This is how we envision this happening. This is how we envision this working in terms of flow. And sometimes they don't know that. Sometimes you have to walk them through that. You have to develop the program for design. You have to develop the concept of operations from what they tell you their vision is and what they feel they need. You'll then visit the site or a facility if it's a renovation, and usually that's the entire team. You go to the site, you walk the land, you see what it's all about, you obtain surveys, you obtain as-built, which is existing drawings if it's an existing building that you're going to renovate. You'll get geotech information, you'll get information on all the utilities serving the site in terms of the capacity. All of the standards, codes, that's a lot of research when you visit the site. And then the next step would be to validate the program. You review the program that you've developed. Now you've been to the site, you review it against the budget and make sure that it's still on track. And if not, you adjust. Bring the square footage down, bring the size down, bring what you need to so that you stay within the budget. And then you develop the concepts. Early concepts are nothing more than what we call bubble diagrams. They're just circles. They're proportional to the size of the facility, but it's just relationships. You develop the bubble that here's the entry, and after the entry, they're going to go to the reception area, and after reception, they're going to go to waiting. So these are just circles that start to develop the footprint and the massing of the building. You look at multiple options. You consider the pros and cons of each. And then with your customer, with your client, you choose one that is best to move forward. And then you go into project development. And in project development, you move well past the bubble diagrams and you do very specific room by room layouts. You consider the flow, the patient flow. In my case, when I do medical facilities, consider the patient flow, adjacencies, how people are going to get from space to space so that it is efficient. Then you work the construction documents, and those are the details. Details, details, details. A lot of coordination among all of the disciplines to make sure everything works. And then finally, the construction and what is the roles of the architect? How much are they going to be responsible for? Sometimes they'll hire out a third party to do the construction, but all of that flows through from the beginning when you're selected for a project to the actual construction. I'm just sharing with you some of the jobs that I've worked on recently, and this particular one is Schofield Barracks, an Army medical facility in Hawaii. And it's a very old historic facility. It's actually on the historic register. So it was important that we kept the historic look and that it fit well within the existing campus, the existing medical campus area. So this is a RFP, which is the request for proposal that I mentioned. These three pictures are just some, very little of the proposal that we put together in hopes of getting the project. So it was a lot of effort, a whole lot of effort by many, many people in our firm and with our joint venture, to put this package together and submit it in hopes that we would be selected from the request for proposal. And we were, in fact. So we did get to design this project. And in fact, they just turned over the keys and completed construction on this recently. But this is an example of the effort that went in for a request for proposal for it was a clinic in Hawaii. So this next project is the Marine Corps Recruiting Depot in San Diego. And this is for anybody that wants to join the Marines west of the Mississippi would go through this recruiting depot in San Diego, and this is the medical facility. So it has all of the different specialties to give them clearance for their medical clearances, anything that might happen while they're being recruited and going through their processing and their training, including dental and medical. This is a 35% design, so this is pretty basic. You can see the various departments and the colors on the one drawing, and the other drawing shows the path. The recruits, what paths they would take, where they would enter, staff, what paths they would take. So it's laid out very efficiently, and this was a project that 35% design was submitted. We're now at 65% design, which shows a lot more detail, has all of the equipment laid in, and we obtained this as one of our IDIQs. So we were already under contract, and they gave us this project as one of the work orders within a contract that we already had. So this next project is Ordinance Barracks, which is in Germany. And it's interesting because when I was stationed in Germany, my daughter was born at Landstuhl Hospital, which is the current hospital in Germany, and it will be replaced by Ordinance Barracks Medical Facility. We were hired to be a third-party reviewer for this project. It's being designed by a German firm with expertise from the U.S., and we were hired to make sure that it met all U.S. codes and standards. It's a very large facility. It's almost 1 million square feet. About 1,500 people work within the facility, and it serves about 200,000 people in the European command. So a very large medical center, a lot of fun to be part of, especially because of my personal connection to it as a replacement for where my daughter was born in 1987 when we were stationed there. It's a little bit older project. This was done as a 2011 project, completed in 2013, I believe. The top picture is an actual photograph of once it was complete. It's a clinic at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. The bottom right picture is almost exactly the same angle, and it is the rendering that we did as part of our design. So you can see how similar the actual photograph is to our rendering. This particular clinic was a pediatric clinic for children, and so we incorporated some fun elements, some fun design elements. You can see in the lower left that the terrazzo floor kind of mimics the locale and their connection to the water and the ocean, where we use blue terrazzo to kind of be water flowing throughout the large space. The seating islands were actually described as that, islands within the water, and some of that glass around the seating to provide some privacy was actually privacy glass that had elements of seagrass embedded in them. So we took a theme and carried it through the interior of the facility, and that's kind of a fun aspect of what you're able to do with your architectural design. This is just a slide with some basic opportunities as an architect. Like any profession, the salary is going to vary depending on where you are in the country, who you're working for, depending on your skills, your experience, your recognition. But starting salary is about $50,000, upwards of $100,000 or more. Like most professional, you'll have typical benefits, you'll have insurance, you'll have 401k, you will earn vacation time. There are promotion opportunities for sure within the field of architecture. Before you are registered, before you sit for your exam and you have your license, you will probably work in a firm and just work a lot of details. Once you gain experience, once you get your design license, then you can be in a position of being a project manager and being in charge of the team and overseeing a particular project. And then certainly there's opportunities to own the firm if that's something that you aspire to. There certainly will always be a need for architects and design teams. Years ago it was paper and pencil. Now it's very much computerized, but there will always be a need for architects and design teams to design the buildings of the future. Working as a team is key. The architects are typically the team leads. So as a project manager, you are in charge. There's a lot that goes with that, a lot of skill sets that are required to lead a team. It's very rewarding. I think a key opportunity, it's very rewarding to see something that you envisioned, that you had in your head, come to fruition and be constructed. So that's a big plus in the design world. Technology allows us to work from our homes, especially during these COVID times. To be honest, this hasn't changed for me. Working from home is something that I have done since I accepted my job with Sherlock, Smith & Adams in Montgomery. They're based in Alabama, but I work from home, and I am able to connect to their server. I am able to connect to my teams virtually on a regular basis. So it really hasn't changed, this whole issue of COVID, but it's architects and the design is certainly something that we can do during these challenging times. In fact, we've had virtual design reviews with clients over the last year where we have dozens and dozens and dozens of people on Zoom and Skype and various platforms for meeting and walk through the drawings with them and entertain any questions. And so it's definitely something that can be handled in our current situation. Transition from architect to U.S. Air Force officer. And the two are the same for me, my experience in the Air Force as an architect. But I want to talk to you a little bit more about what it's like being an officer in the military. I was offered an ROTC scholarship in my second year of a 5-year professional program. And I thought, honestly, why not? Why not accept the scholarship to pay for my school? I understood that I would owe them 4 years being in the military for that scholarship. And I thought, I can do anything for 4 years. If I don't like it, I can get out. I ended up loving it. I ended up absolutely loving it. I stayed in for my full 20 years, at which point I retired. During that time, I was stationed in 6 different locations. For the first half of my career, I worked in civil engineering for 10 years. And civil engineering is responsible for all facilities on the base, anything from offices to hangars to commissaries, which is the grocery stores, to housing. Everything is civil engineering is responsible for. And after I worked for civil engineering for 10 years, I transitioned to work for the Surgeon General. And the Surgeon General is responsible for medical facilities on all military installations. And that's a very special area. That doesn't fall within civil engineering. Medical facilities fall under the Surgeon General. So I transitioned from civil engineering to working for medical facilities, and I did that for my last 10 years. Being in the military, I had the opportunity to travel all over the U.S., Asia, Europe. Like I said, I served just over 20 years, which is the number of years required for you to retire and earn a pension. I was commissioned as a second lieutenant after I graduated, and I retired as a lieutenant colonel. So while I was in the service, I, just like the private sector, you have opportunities for advancement and opportunities for progression. I started out as a base architect at Mather Air Force Base in California, my first assignment. And then my second assignment was in Kunsan, Korea, which was a remote assignment. And remote assignment means you can't take your family with you. At that time, I didn't have any children. It was a 1-year assignment. So my husband stayed in the States and I went to Kunsan. and I absolutely loved the job. I was the base master planner for Kunsan and some outlying smaller bases in the vicinity. After Korea, we moved to Europe, and I was at the command level. Rather than a base level, I was at the command level as a program manager at Ramstein. So I was responsible for different jobs as I was stationed there for 4 years. Once we were done at Germany, we came back to the States, and I was a professor at the School of Civil Engineering at Wright-Patt. And so I taught many different courses at Wright-Patterson as a professor and associate professor. At that time, I decided that I wanted to stay in design, so I transferred to health facilities under the Surgeon General. I loved civil engineering. I loved working with different facilities, but I really wanted to stay in design. And I was getting at the point in my career that I was going to transition out of design and do some other things, and I loved the design aspect in being an architect. So I moved to health facilities, working for the Surgeon General, and my first assignment there was in Atlanta. It was downtown Atlanta in a federal facility. And then I was assigned to Maxwell, where I overseed the construction of a ambulatory surgery center, and I retired from Maxwell Air Force Base in 2001. So if becoming a military officer is something that you are interested in, let's talk about how that can be done. You could apply for any of the service academies. The U.S. Air Force Service Academy is located in Colorado Springs. The Army U.S. Military Academy is in West Point. Navy Academy is in Annapolis. And then, although I'm not as familiar with them, the Coast Guard and the Merchant Marines also have service academies in New London, Connecticut, and Kings Point, New York. You can go to any of these service academies and you'll get a world-class education. I know for the Air Force, the estimated worth of a service academy degree is $300,000. I mean, you get room and board, you get even a paycheck as you're attending school, a stipend for your books, a stipend for uniforms, a stipend for things that will be required while you're in school. Just like I owed 4 years by accepting my ROTC scholarship, if you go to a service academy, you will owe 5 years in the military. One of the benefits is you're guaranteed a job after graduation. You won't have to get your degree and then hit the pavement looking for a job. It is absolutely guaranteed that you will have an assignment upon graduation. So if that's something you're interested in, going to a service academy, don't delay. The process actually starts in the spring of your junior year. It's possible to do it in your senior year if you delay, but the timeline gets a little bit crunched. You do need a congressional nomination. So there's a lot of information on how to go about doing this. If it's something you're interested in, please let me know. I would be happy to give you any feedback. They take everything into account, your GPA, your SAT scores, any community involvement. They're looking for the whole person, not just a particular facet of you. They really are looking for leaders. So positions that you hold in school, your involvement in school, scouts, Boys Nation, Girls Nation, any of those extracurricular things that you can do become very, very important for this process and to receive a congressional nomination. They are not easy to get, but great opportunities. Another way you can become an officer is like I did, through ROTC. And so you can get a scholarship for ROTC. You can get a scholarship while you're in college, before you attend college. If you choose to enlist and then want a scholarship to ROTC, that's also a possibility. In ROTC, you will also get a stipend for books and a little bit for living expenses. Typically, it's a 4-year commitment for an ROTC scholarship. Another way you can become an officer, if you already have a degree, is you can go to officer candidate school. So it's called different things depending on the service and different number of weeks. But OTS, OCS, called different things, but it's basically if you already have your degree, Then you can go for the Air Force, it's 9.5 weeks. For the Marines, it's 10 weeks. For the Army, it's 12 weeks. And you will be commissioned after that OTS or OCS. Sometimes you can even be commissioned at a higher rank. You won't be commissioned as a second lieutenant. You could be commissioned and start right away as a captain for unique skill sets or something that they need at the time, and that changes all the time. You can also go to graduate school. I mean, you can pursue a master's in your field, whether you've done a service academy, whether you've done ROTC, or whether you want to apply for a graduate school. After OCS, you can pursue a graduate school in your field with the tuition assistance. If you're on active duty, you can do that as well. They have law programs, they have medical schools. The medical school is located at Bethesda, which is one of the projects I've worked on. I've actually worked in the medical school for projects, but there's lots of opportunities for graduate schools as well. So there's plenty of opportunities. So what kind of jobs are there for Air Force officers? Honestly, anything, almost anything. Any job that you can imagine that you're aware of in the community is also available in the military. And then when you're ready to retire or when you're ready to separate, your skills are marketable, directly marketable and transferable to civilian life. I mean, the first on my list of jobs is an architect only because that's what I was in the military. But anything that you can imagine, engineers of all types, military police, a pilot, navigator, any medical profession, a physician assistant, dentist, nurses, physical therapist, IT, technology officers, any of the information technology that's going on, logisticians, intelligence, lawyers, personnel managers, service managers, chaplain, anything that you can envision in a community is also required in the military. So you could pursue any of those jobs with as a commissioned officer. So military officer opportunities, starting with salary. It's very straightforward. This is all public information. There's no secrets to this. Your salary is based on your rank and the years that you have served. If you're an O1, which is an officer with 1 year experience, your first rank in officer. In the Air Force, it would be called a second lieutenant. In the Navy, it would be called an ensign. If you have less than 2 years experience, less than 2 years in the military, your salary would be about $40,000. All the way up to if you're a O10, which is an officer at the 10th level, a general officer, or an admiral in the Navy, a 4-star officer with more than 20 years experience, you can make over $200,000. There are special pay for some careers and duties. There's hazardous duty pay, there is flying pay, there is different careers that offer supplemental pay. The benefits and risk, you will have insurance, all insurance. There are no copays, there are no deductibles to your healthcare programs or plans. It's all covered. You will get a housing allowance on top of your salary because if you're stationed in Washington, D.C., the cost of living is much higher than if you're stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. So your housing allowance is on top of that salary. You get 30 days vacation, and that doesn't matter if you're a second lieutenant or if you're a general officer. You have 30 days paid vacation. You go where you're told. There are risks involved, and don't second guess that. There are definitely risks involved, and you can't say, no, that doesn't sound like a fun assignment, I think I'll pass. You go where you are needed. Another benefit is you can retire after 20 years. So if you go as a commissioned officer right after you graduate from college and serve for 20 years, you can retire with a pension. And the pension has changed over time, but you still have a pension after 20 years, and you're still in your 40s where you can start another career or continue the career with the skill sets that you have earned and learned in the military until you decide to retire after your second job. There are regular promotion boards. There is minimum time that you have to serve within your grade to be considered. Normally, before you are considered to go from an O1 to an O2, you must be in that rank for a minimum of 18 months. The percentages for who is promoted from an O1, or in Air Force terminology, a second lieutenant to a first lieutenant, is about 100%. Unless you do something really bad, unless you mess up really bad, you will typically be promoted from a second lieutenant to a first lieutenant, or an O1 to an O2. As your grade increases, as your rank increases, the percentage of those that make it to the next grade goes down. They simply don't need as many lieutenant colonels as they need second lieutenants. You're becoming in more leadership positions, and they don't need as many leaders in the higher ranks. When you go to a captain or an O3, you need 4 years' time in service, and that's close to 100% for that. But then it starts moving. If you go to an O4, which is a major, that's usually you meet the board at about your 10-year point, and there's 80% of people that will become a major. And for an O5, 16 years, about 60%. And it continues to go down in the percentages. I retired at 20 years of service. If I would have stayed and chose to meet the 06 board, full colonel board, then I would have owed another 2 years. And my decision personally was my folks were getting older, my parents were getting older, and I wanted to retire and move back to Erie so that I could be of help. If you are selected to the next rank, you owe a certain amount of time for that, for being selected. So I was a Air Force officer, and now my son is at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. He is actually a C2C, which is a cadet second class. He's in his junior year. He is one of our 3 kids that went to McDowell, and he received an appointment to the Air Force Academy through his congressional nomination. And so he's there at the Academy now. So I can speak to you from my perspective as being an Air Force officer. I know something about the process if you're interested in going to an academy, just because my son has been through that process. He serves on their parachute team. So he is one of the Wings of Blue parachute guys, and you can Google it and you can look at it, but he absolutely loves it. It's one of the opportunities that he has received at the Air Force Academy. It is something that he is truly enjoying. My dad also served in World War II, so we do have military in our family, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions concerning military commissioning or the academies, or just reach out to me if there's anything that I can help you with. I wish you all luck as you contemplate your career options. There are so many options to consider. I really encourage you to love what you do. If you love what you do, you'll never feel like you're working a day in your life. Make sure you set your sights on your goals and work toward those goals, but if something changes and something doesn't feel right, check it. Don't be afraid to change your mind. If you have any questions, there's my email again. Feel free to reach out to me and keep reaching for your goals. Good luck, everybody.